Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating analysis of modern China. The central argument is that the country isn't heading for some huge, spectacular collapse. Nope. Instead, it's heading for something, well, a lot weirder. A systemic stalemate, a kind of deep paralysis that could define its future for a long time to come.
Okay, so let's jump right in. I mean, you see it all the time, right? A top official gets purged, a general just vanishes. On the surface, it looks like one crisis after another. And yet, the very top, the core leadership, they seem completely untouchable. So what gives? How is that even possible? It's a paradox that honestly reveals everything about how the system is designed to survive.
All right, first up, let's talk about that inner circle. If you really want to get a grip on China's stability, you've got to stop thinking of the system as just a government. It's more like a fortress, and it's been meticulously engineered from the ground up to contain and put out its own fires. Okay, and this slide right here, it's the perfect way to see how that fortress has been upgraded over time. Just look at the difference between these two cases. On one hand, you have the Wang Lejun case from a while back. That thing totally spiraled out of control, right? It became this huge international incident, took down a major political player. But then you have the more recent Shen Wei case, which was tied to people way up top, and it was just contained, surgically. So what's the difference? What changed?
Well, it all boils down to one thing: controlling the information. You know, Wang Lejun basically went public, he ran to a US consulate. But Chen Weiyi, he confessed to the party's internal discipline commission. And that's a total black box. Any dirt he might have had on his powerful bosses, fit. It went straight into a metaphorical shredder. And you can see the game theory at play here. It's simple, really. Keep your mouth shut, take the fall quietly, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get a lighter sentence. The whole system is built to reward silence.
So here's the kicker. These purges, they aren't actually signs of the system being weak or unstable. It's the exact opposite. They're actually a show of force, a demonstration of just how total the top-down control really is. Those firewalls, they're working exactly like they're supposed to, protecting the very core of power.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the military, because you're going to see the exact same logic at play here. This idea of using systemic weakness as a form of control. I mean, on paper, China's military is one of the most powerful in the world, but in practice, well, that's a whole different story.
The entire military has been basically re-engineered from the ground up with one main goal: to make it completely coup-proof. So picture this: you're a general in charge of a battle zone. You can't promote your own guys. You can't even control their pay. All your fuel, your ammo, your food, that's all controlled by a totally separate department way back in Beijing. And just to be sure, every single unit has a political commissar who can literally veto any order you give. It's a system that prioritizes loyalty way above battlefield agility.
And this, right here, this is the core idea. The military is paralyzed by design. The whole point is to make sure no single general can ever get their hands on everything they'd need, the troops, the money, and the authority to challenge the top leadership.
But, you know, this obsession with political control, it has a really nasty side effect: massive corruption. The recent purges we've seen in the rocket force, they point to a really deep problem. And it's led some analysts to come up with this fascinating term: Schrödinger's missiles.
So what on earth are Schrödinger's missiles? Well, it means maybe the fuel in those missiles has been swapped out for water, or maybe the military-grade parts have been replaced with cheap civilian knockoffs. The missile silo doors, they might not even open right. The scary part is, nobody knows for sure. Not even the top leader can be 100% certain those weapons will work until someone actually presses the button. And that creates this fatal lack of trust in their own military hardware.
And if you think that sounds bad, history has a really chilling warning for us. See, back in the 1979 war with Vietnam, the military command had just been through a bunch of political purges, and it was completely paralyzed by fear. There's this one infamous battle where an entire regiment got surrounded. And you know what happened? Nearby friendly units just watched. They were too scared to try a rescue without a direct, politically safe order from way up the chain of command because they were terrified of being blamed if it went wrong. The regiment was annihilated. It's just a brutal lesson in what happens when political fear completely guts military professionalism.
All right, now we have to talk about the economy, because it's facing its own massive systemic crisis. And this one directly threatens the state's most basic ability to keep control.
And this chart right here, it shows you the Achilles heel. That huge budget for stability maintenance. You know, all the cops, the surveillance tech. It's not really paid for by the central government in Beijing. Nope. A shocking 85% of that bill is footed by local governments, and for decades they had what seemed like a magic money tree to pay for it all. But here's the problem. That tree is now dead.
So what was this magic money tree? Well, it was a model called land finance. It worked like this. A local government would borrow a ton of money to build roads, bridges, you name it. That construction boom made the land around it super valuable. Then, they'd sell off that land to developers at inflated prices, pay back their loans, and use the profits to fund everything else, including that massive security budget. And the analysis we're looking at here, it doesn't mince words. It calls this model what it is, a Ponzi scheme.
And that Ponzi scheme, it's created a hidden debt bomb that could be as big as 90 trillion yuan. That's a staggering number. And now, with China's property market in free fall, that bomb is starting to detonate. The land isn't selling anymore, the revenue has dried up, but all that debt, oh, it's still there.
And this is where you get the fiscal death spiral. The cash flow coming in has totally collapsed, but as the economy gets worse, the need to spend more on security and stability maintenance is only going up. So what happens when a local government literally can't afford to pay its auxiliary police officers anymore, or can't even pay the electricity bill to keep the surveillance servers running? Well, the physical machinery of the surveillance state just starts to grind to a halt.
Okay, so you've got all this pressure building up, right? Political, military, economic. The obvious question is, why aren't people out on the streets? Why isn't there a massive popular uprising? Well, the answer, it seems, lies in how society itself has been structured.
Society has been pretty deliberately atomized. It's been broken down into all these little pieces that can't or won't team up. Think about it. Soldiers are kept in isolated barracks, and they're basically taught to view civilians as a potential enemy. Business owners, they're terrified of instability. They'd much rather just close up shop or even leave the country than risk everything in a revolution. And what about the good officials, the ones with a conscience? They're trapped. They're powerless inside a system that rewards blind loyalty, not actual competence.
So what you get isn't a revolution. It's not a bang. It's more of a long, slow whimper. The term for this is governance paralysis. It's this weird state where nobody is openly rebelling, but nobody is really working either. Orders come down from Beijing, and by the time they reach the local level, they're just empty words. It's actually got this eerie resemblance to the twilight years of the Ming Dynasty, this slow, grinding rot, where the structure is still standing, but it's been completely hollowed out. So, okay, we've peeled back all these different layers, right? The politics, the military, the economy, society itself. And what we're left with is the final diagnosis, the core thesis of this whole analysis. And that diagnosis is a concept called historical garbage time. Yeah, it's a term they borrowed from sports, you know? It's like the last 2 minutes of a basketball game where one team is up by 30 points. The game is technically still going, but the outcome is already decided. It's just garbage time. And politically, that's the argument here. A long, hopeless stalemate where the regime is way too strong to collapse, but it's also too decayed and dysfunctional to actually fix anything. So it's not some big, spectacular explosion. It's a long, slow, suffocating rot. And the analysis suggests this stalemate, this garbage time, is probably going to last for a while. It'll likely keep going until one of 3 massive events happens that could actually break the whole thing open. First, a complete financial meltdown, where the state literally runs out of cash to pay the army and the police. Second, a disastrous military adventure, a failed war that just shatters the regime's credibility. Or third, what's called a biological endpoint. The top leader suddenly dies and there's no clear successor, kicking off a massive power vacuum.
And that brings us to the final crucial question that this whole analysis leaves us with. It really seems like the system won't just explode. It's too tightly controlled for that. But is it slowly suffocating itself? Is all the immense pressure needed to maintain that control, the political paranoia, the broken economic model, the fractured society, is all of that just slowly choking the life out of the system from the inside? That's the real takeaway here. The big story isn't some dramatic, sudden crash. It's the much grimmer reality of a long, slow decay with no clear exit in sight.